The blood soaking through my jacket wasn't mine, but the 6 men with guns scanning the crowded Chicago street didn't know that. "Just keep walking, sweetheart," I whispered loudly enough for the nearest assassin to hear, wrapping my arm more firmly around the stranger's waist as he sagged against me. "You promised you'd stop drinking on work nights." The man I was half carrying could barely stand, his expensive suit torn and darkening with blood from somewhere I couldn't see. 30 seconds ago, I'd been leaving my shift at Mercy Hospital, exhausted from a double shift in the ER, when he'd literally stumbled into me in the alley behind the building. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. His eyes, forest green and fever bright with pain, had locked onto mine with desperate intensity. "Play along," he'd gasped, his accent carrying the barest, a hint of Eastern Europe beneath polished American English. "Please." Then the black SUVs had screeched around the corner, and men in dark suits had poured onto the street, weapons barely concealed beneath their jackets. My nursing instincts had catalogued his injuries in seconds. Gunshot wound, left shoulder, possibly another in his side, losing blood fast, going into shock. My survival instincts had made a split-second decision that would change everything. Now, as we shuffled past the first assassin, I kept up my performance. "I don't care what your boss said about the deadline, Mark. You're not going back to the office tonight." I let my voice carry the exasperated affection of a wife who'd had this conversation too many times. The stranger's breathing had gone shallow against my neck, his weight increasing as his legs threatened to give out. He was at least 6 inches taller than my 5'6" frame, all lean muscle and broad shoulders that made supporting him feel like trying, and to hold up a collapsing building. "Keep it together," I thought desperately, both to him and to myself. "Ma'am." The assassin stepped directly into our path, his cold eyes scanning us both. Up close, I could see the bulge of a shoulder holster beneath his jacket, the way his hand rested casually near his weapon. "Have you seen anyone running through here?" "Injured man. Dark hair. Probably bleeding." I looked up at him with the most annoyed expression I could muster, while my heart hammered so hard I was certain he could hear it. "Injured? The only injury around here is going to be my husband's pride when his coworkers find out he couldn't handle 3 beers. I gave the stranger a little shake for emphasis, and he let out a convincing groan that might have been genuine pain masked as drunken misery. The assassin's eyes narrowed, taking in the stranger's disheveled appearance, the way he kept his face buried against my shoulder, the dark stains spreading across both our clothes. In the dim streetlight, blood could pass for spilled alcohol if you weren't looking too closely. "Please don't look too closely. Where are you headed?" Another assassin had joined the first, this one younger with a scar running down his left cheek. "Home," I said firmly, shifting my grip on the stranger as his knees buckled slightly. 3 blocks that way. And we're already late because someone decided to stop at Murphy's bar, instead of coming straight from the office like he promised. I injected just enough resentment into my voice to sell the domestic scene. The 2 assassins exchanged glances, some silent communication passing between them. The stranger chose that moment to mumble something incoherent against my neck, his warm breath sending an involuntary shiver down my spine that I desperately hoped looked like irritation rather than fear. "Check them," the scarred one ordered. My stomach dropped as rough hands grabbed the stranger, pulling him away from me. His eyes flew open, meeting mine for just a heartbeat, and I saw the resignation there. He thought this was it, the end. Something fierce rose up in me, the same stubborn determination that had gotten me through nursing school while working 3 jobs, that had kept me standing through 18-hour shifts in the ER. I'd spent the last 5 years of my life saving people. I wasn't about to let this man die on a Chicago street while I stood by and did nothing. "Hey," I snapped, grabbing the stranger's arm with the authority I used on belligerent drunk patients in the ER. "You want to search my husband for whatever the hell you're looking for? Fine. But do it fast because he's about to throw up, and I am not paying for dry cleaning on your fancy suit." I stepped closer, invading the scarred assassin's personal space in a way that made him instinctively lean back. He's got a weak stomach when he drinks, fair warning. The stranger caught on immediately, making a convincing retching sound that sent both assassins stepping back in disgust. The hands that had been reaching to pat him down hesitated. "He's clean," the first assassin decided, wrinkling his nose. "Just some drunk idiot. Keep moving." I didn't wait for them to change their minds. Wrapping my arm back around the stranger's waist, I half-dragged him down the street, feeling the weight of 6 pairs of eyes burning into my back, Don't run. Don't look back. Just keep walking like you do this every Friday night. We'd made it maybe 20 feet when I heard one of them shout, "Wait, that's not... Move!" The stranger growled, suddenly finding reserves of strength I hadn't known he possessed. His hand closed around mine, and we ran. The night exploded with sound. Footsteps pounding behind us, shouts in multiple languages, the distinctive click of safeties being released. I'd lived in Chicago my whole life, knew these streets the way I knew the layout of the ER, and that knowledge became our salvation. I yanked him left into an alley I'd cut through 1,000 times, then right through a gap between buildings that barely fit his shoulders. "There," he gasped, pointing to a fire escape with his good arm. The other hung uselessly at his side, blood running down his fingers to drip onto the pavement in a trail that screamed our location to anyone who knew how to look. I'd never climbed a fire escape so fast in my life. The metal was slick with recent rain, and twice I nearly lost my grip, but the sound of our pursuers getting closer gave me strength I didn't know I possessed. The stranger was right behind me, moving with the fluid grace of someone who'd done this before despite his injuries. We ended up on a rooftop 5 stories above the street, pressed flat against the gravel surface as flashlight beams swept the alley below. His breathing had gone ragged, and even in the darkness, I could see the way he was shaking. "You're going into shock," I whispered, already unzipping my jacket to get to the wounds. Beneath his ruined shirt, my hands found the entry wound in his shoulder first, then another lower, just above his hip. "You need a hospital." "No hospitals." His hand caught my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong for someone who'd lost this much blood. "They'll find me there. They have people everywhere." "Then you need me to stop the bleeding here, and you need to tell me who the hell they are and why 6 men with guns want you dead." Those green eyes found mine in the darkness, and I saw the moment he made a decision. Trust or die. There wasn't really a choice. "My name is Damian Volkov," he said, and even through the pain, his voice carried an authority that made me understand why those men were so desperate to find him. "And if you help me survive tonight, I promise you'll never have to work another double shift at that hospital again." I should have run. Should have called the police and let them sort out whatever mob war I'd just stumbled into. Instead, I pressed my hands against his wounds to slow the bleeding and asked the only question that mattered. "Where can we go that's safe?" His smile was sharp despite the pain. "Nowhere in this city is safe for me tonight, but I know someone who owes me a favor in Little Italy. Can you get us there without being seen?" I thought about my tiny apartment 3 blocks away, the quiet life I'd built after putting myself through nursing school, the careful boundaries I'd drawn around my world to keep it simple and safe. Then I looked at the man bleeding out on the roof, who'd trusted me with his life based on nothing more than a moment of kindness in an alley. "I can get us there," I said, already mentally mapping the route through back streets and residential areas where black SUVs would stand out. "But you're going to tell me everything on the way." "And I mean everything, Damian Volkov." "Deal," he whispered, just before his eyes rolled back and his body went limp in my arms. The unconscious criminal in my lap weighed approximately 200 pounds of pure dead weight and bleeding complications. My ER training kicked into automatic assessment mode even as panic threatened to overwhelm rational thought. Pulse thready but present, respirations shallow, blood pressure dropping based on the clammy feel of his skin. He had maybe an hour, 2 at most, before shock progressed past the point where makeshift first aid could help. I couldn't carry him, could barely drag him, and every minute we stayed on this rooftop increased the chances of those assassins widening their search pattern to include the buildings above street level. My phone was in my pocket, fully charged, connected to a world of emergency services and rational responses to impossible situations. Instead of dialing 911 like a sane person would, I pulled up my contacts and scrolled to a name I hadn't called in 6 months. "This better be important, Sophia," my ex-boyfriend Jake answered on the 3rd ring, irritation clear in his voice. "Do you know what time it is?" "I need your car," I said without preamble. "And before you ask, no, I can't explain, and yes, it's literally life or death." The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Jake Martinez and I had dated for 8 months before mutually agreeing we were better as friends than lovers. He was a paramedic, understood the insane hours and emotional toll of medical work, and more importantly, he lived 4 blocks from where I was currently crouched on a rooftop with an unconscious crime lord. "Where are you?" His voice had shifted from annoyed to professionally concerned, the tone he used when talking down suicidal jumpers or calming panicked families in the ER. Rooftop. Anderson and 5th. Jake, I can't. My voice cracked slightly, the adrenaline that had gotten me this far starting to fracture. I can't call the police, but I need help, and I need it now. I'll be there in 5 minutes. And… Sophia? He paused, and I could hear him moving, grabbing keys, pulling on shoes. This doesn't make us even for the time I had to call you to bail me out of that situation in Milwaukee. Despite everything, I almost laughed. Not even close. Jake arrived in 4 minutes driving his ancient Honda Civic that barely qualified as street legal. By then, I'd managed to drag Damien to the fire escape, fashioning a pressure bandage from my scrubs top and praying the bleeding would slow enough to buy us time. The stranger's skin had gone cold to the touch, his breathing so shallow I had to press my fingers to his throat to confirm his heart was still beating. Jesus Christ, Sophia. Jake stared at the unconscious man, then at me, his dark eyes wide with shock. That's Damien Volkov. Do you have any idea who that is? A man bleeding to death who needs our help, I replied sharply, already beginning the awkward process of getting dead weight down a fire escape. Are you going to help me or give me a lecture on Chicago crime families? Jake helped. That was the thing about paramedics and nurses who'd worked together through the worst the ER could throw at you. When the crisis hit, you moved first and processed later. Between the two of us, we managed to get Damien into Jake's backseat, and I climbed in after him, keeping pressure on the wounds while Jake drove. Where are we going? Jake asked, pulling into traffic with the practiced ease of someone who'd navigated Chicago streets at all hours for the past decade. I gave him the address Damien had mentioned before losing consciousness. A restaurant in Little Italy called Benedetto's. Jake's hands tightened on the steering wheel. That's Castellano territory, he said quietly. Sophia, the Castellanos and the Volkovs have been at war for 6 months. If we show up there with Damien Volkov, we'll be lucky if we're only shot. He said someone there owed him a favor. Or it's a trap and we're driving him straight to his enemies. Jake caught my eyes in the rearview mirror. Last chance to reconsider this incredibly stupid plan. I looked down at Damien's face, peaceful in unconsciousness, younger somehow, without those intense green eyes watching everything with predatory awareness. There was a scar along his jawline I hadn't noticed before, another through his left eyebrow. This man lived with violence the way I lived with antiseptic and fluorescent lights. Keep driving, I said softly. Benedetto's was closed when we arrived, metal shutters pulled down over the windows, a single light burning in a second-story window. Jake killed the engine but left the keys in the ignition, the universal sign of someone ready to run at the first hint of trouble. I'll go, I said, already opening the car door. If shooting starts, drive away. Don't wait for me. Sophia. I mean it, Jake. You've got a wife and a kid on the way. This isn't your fight. I was halfway across the empty street when the Dade restaurant's front door opened. A woman stepped out, and even from a distance, I could see she was beautiful in that timeless way that suggested Italian ancestry and expensive grooming. She wore all black, her dark hair pulled back in an elegant twist, her posture radiating the kind of confidence that came from growing up protected and powerful. You're the nurse, she said, not a question. Her voice carried a slight accent, something Mediterranean that softened her consonants. The one who saved him from Kozlov's men. I stopped walking, suddenly aware that I was covered in blood, exhausted, and standing in the middle of a street in Little Italy at 2 a.m. with no plan beyond hoping this stranger would help instead of kill us all. He said someone here owed him a favor, I replied, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. Was that you? It was. She moved down the steps with fluid grace, her eyes moving past me to Jake's car, where Damien's unconscious form was, visible through the window. Bring him inside, quickly. Kozlov has people watching all the hospitals, but he doesn't know about this place. Not yet. Why should I trust you? The question emerged before I could stop it, my exhaustion translating to bluntness. For all I know, you're the one who sent those assassins. Her expression shifted, something like respect flickering across her features. I'm Isabella Castellano. Damien saved my brother's life 8 months ago when he could have let Kozlov's men kill him to eliminate a business rival. In my world, nurse, debts like that are sacred. She turned and walked back toward the restaurant. You can trust me or take your chances with every other option in this city. Choose quickly. They're already searching the hospitals, And your apartment. My apartment. The words sent ice down my spine. They knew where I lived, knew who I was. In the span of 40 minutes, my carefully constructed life had become a target. Jake and I got Damien inside, carrying him through the darkened restaurant and up narrow stairs to what appeared to be a private apartment above the business. The space was surprisingly utilitarian, more safe house than home, with medical supplies already laid out on a table that looked suspiciously prepared for exactly this situation. You were expecting us, I said, already moving to examine Damien's wounds more thoroughly in the better light. I was expecting him, Isabella corrected, handing me surgical scissors to cut away his ruined shirt. He called me 20 minutes before you showed up, said if he didn't make it, to find the nurse who saved him and keep her safe. I paused, meeting her dark eyes across Damien's unconscious form. Why would he do that? He doesn't even know my name. He knows enough. Isabella's expression was unreadable. Damien Volkov doesn't make mistakes about people. If he thinks you're worth protecting, then you are. The bullet in his shoulder had passed through cleanly, but the one in his side was still lodged against his 8th rib. I'd assisted with enough trauma surgeries to know what needed to be done, but doing it in a makeshift operating room above an Italian restaurant with minimal supplies was far from ideal. I need better light, I said, falling into the focused calm that came with medical crisis. And someone to assist. Is there a doctor you trust? I'll assist. Isabella was already scrubbing her hands at the kitchen sink. I have medical training, field medicine mostly, but I know what I'm doing. Jake had gone pale, standing uselessly by the door. I should go, he said quietly. Sophia, I can't be here. Jenna's due in 3 months, and if something happens to me... Go, I said, not looking up from where I was irrigating Damien's wounds. Thank you for the ride. And Jake, forget this happened. All of it. He left without another word, and I tried not to think about the fact that I'd just pushed away one of the few friends I had left in this city. Tried not to think about my apartment that was apparently being watched, or the fact that I was about to perform surgery on a crime lord in an illegal clinic, or that 6 assassins were still searching for us somewhere in the Chicago night. Instead, I focused on the bullet lodged against Damien Volkov's ribcage and the steady hands of Isabella Castellano as she held the retractors exactly where I needed them. He's stronger than he looks, Isabella said softly as I worked. Most men would have died from blood loss before you got him here. Most men don't have 6 assassins chasing them. I replied, finally grasping the bullet with forceps and slowly, carefully extracting it. What did he do to make Kozlov want him dead so badly? He existed. Isabella's voice carried a weight of history I didn't understand. The Volkov and Kozlov families have been enemies for 3 generations. It's not about business anymore. Hasn't been for years. It's about blood and pride and wounds so old no one remembers how they started. The bullet came free, and I dropped it into a metal bowl with a satisfying clink. Damien's vitals had stabilized slightly, his breathing evening out as the immediate crisis passed. He'd need blood, antibiotics, monitoring for infection and complications, but he'd survive. At least through the night. You should sleep, Isabella said as I finished the last suture. There's a bedroom through there. I'll watch him. I should have argued. Should have insisted on monitoring my patient, maintaining the professional distance I'd spent 5 years cultivating. Instead, I looked at the blood covering my hands, my scrubs, evidence of a night that had irrevocably changed everything, and I nodded. The bedroom was small but clean, with a lock on the door that I immediately engaged. My phone had 17 missed calls. 5 from the hospital wanting to know why I hadn't shown up for my morning shift. 3 from my neighbor asking if I'd seen the strange men asking questions about me, and 9 from numbers I didn't recognize. I powered it off and threw it on the dresser. Sleep came in fragments. Dreams of green eyes and blood-soaked streets, of Isabella's knowing expression and Jake's terrified face. When I finally woke, sunlight was streaming through unfamiliar windows, and the smell of coffee was drifting under the door. I found Damien awake in the main room, sitting up despite his injuries, arguing with Isabella in rapid Italian that I couldn't follow. He fell silent when he saw me, those intense green eyes tracking my movement from doorway to the coffee pot with an attention that made me hyper-aware of every step. You saved my life, he said in English, his accent more pronounced than it had been on the rooftop. Twice. Once from Kozlov's men, and once from bleeding out in a restaurant above Little Italy. I'm a nurse, I replied, pouring coffee with hands that were steadier than I felt. It's what I do. No. He stood slowly, moving with the careful precision of someone testing their limits. What you did was choose to involve yourself in something dangerous to save a stranger. That's not training. That's character. Isabella stood as well, reaching for her coat. I have to check on the restaurant. Damien, don't do anything stupid while I'm gone. Sophia, there's food in the kitchen and clothes in the bedroom that should fit you. She paused at the door. Your apartment is being watched. Your hospital has been asking questions. You can't go back to your old life. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The door closed behind her, leaving me alone with a crime lord who owed me his life and apparently thought that meant something significant. They know my name, I said quietly, stating the obvious. They know where I live. They know more than that by now. Damien moved to the window, looking out at the street below with the practiced vigilance of someone always calculating threats. Kozlov will have pulled every record, every connection. He'll know where you work, who your friends are, where you went to school. He'll be looking for leverage. I don't have leverage. I'm nobody. He turned from the window, and the intensity in his gaze made my breath catch. You stopped 6 trained assassins from finding me with nothing but quick thinking and courage. You performed field surgery to save my life. You're nobody's definition of nobody, Sophia. The way he said my name, like he'd taken time to learn its pronunciation, to understand its weight, sent an unexpected warmth through my chest that I immediately tried to suppress. So what happens now? I asked, proud that my voice stayed level. Do I just hide here forever while you fight your war with Kozlov? No. Damien crossed the room, moving into my space with that same fluid grace, despite his injuries. Up close, I could see the exhaustion etched around his eyes, the pain he was carefully controlling. Now you let me protect. You the way you protected me. I have resources, safe houses, people who owe me favors across the city. I can keep you alive until this is over. And when does it end? I challenged, meeting his eyes despite the way my heart was racing. When Kozlov is dead, when his family is destroyed, this kind of war doesn't end, Damien. It just pauses long enough to find new reasons to keep killing. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect. You're right, he said softly. It doesn't end, not without someone choosing to end it. His hand came up, hesitating inches from my face before dropping back to his side. I'm sorry you got caught in this. I'm sorry your life is collateral damage in a war you never chose. The apology, unexpected and genuine, cracked something in my carefully maintained composure. I'd spent the last 12 hours running on adrenaline and training, pushing aside fear and uncertainty in favor of action. Now, standing in the morning light with reality of my situation settling around me like ash, the walls I'd built threatened to crumble. I need air, I said abruptly, moving toward the window. Don't. His hand caught my wrist, pulling me back. Kozlov has snipers. They've been watching the streets since dawn, waiting for any sign of me. I stared at his hand on my wrist, at the blood still dried under his fingernails, the bandages showing through his borrowed shirt. This man was dangerous, connected to a world of violence and death that I'd spent my entire life avoiding. Everything logical screamed at me to pull away, to demand he let me go, to find some way back to the normal life that had existed just 24 hours ago. Instead, I asked the question that had been burning since the moment he'd stumbled into me in that alley. Why were you alone last night? Where was your security, your backup? Don't people like you travel with bodyguards? Damien's expression went carefully blank, but not before I caught the flash of pain that had nothing to do with bullet wounds. I was meeting someone I trusted, someone who'd been with my family for 15 years. He released my wrist, turning away. He sold me out to Kozlov for money and a promise that his family would be spared when they moved against the Volkovs. Betrayal. The word hung unspoken between us, carrying a weight I understood from my own history. My ex-fiancé, who'd left when my mother got sick and caring for her, interfered with his career plans. The nursing director who'd promised me a position and then given it to someone with better connections. Small betrayals compared to one that nearly cost a life, but the wound felt similar. I'm sorry, I said quietly, meaning it. Don't be. He turned back, and the mask had returned, all traces of vulnerability carefully concealed. It was a lesson I should have learned years ago. Trust is a weapon people use to hurt you. That's a dark way to live. It's the only way to survive in my world. He moved to the table where Isabella had left his phone, scrolling through messages with increasing tension in his shoulders. I need to leave soon. Kozlov won't stop searching, and the longer I stay, the more danger I bring to Isabella and this place. Where will you go? I have a safe house in Oak Park. Kozlov doesn't know about it. No one does except my sister, and she's in Europe right now. He looked up from the phone, green eyes studying me with that same intense focus. You should come with me. The invitation hung in the air between us, loaded with implications I wasn't ready to examine. I can't just run away with a crime lord I met 12 hours ago, I said, trying for lightness and failing. That's not how my life works. Your life doesn't work the way it did 12 hours ago. His voice was gentle but firm. Going back to your apartment means answering Kozlov's questions. Going back to the hospital means becoming a target every time you step outside. You helped. Me, Sophia. That made you part of this whether you chose it or not. So I'm just supposed to hide? Give up everything I've built? For now, yes. He moved closer, and I found myself unable to step back. Until I can end this. Until Kozlov is no longer a threat. Then you can have your life back, if that's what you still want. And if it takes years? I challenged. If it never ends? His hand came up again, and this time it didn't hesitate. His fingers brushed my cheek with surprising gentleness, his touch warm despite everything. Then I'll spend however long it takes making sure you're safe. I told you, Sophia. Debts like the one I owe you are sacred. I should have pulled away. Should have argued that I didn't need his protection, that I could handle myself, that I'd been surviving just fine before a bleeding crime lord stumbled into my life. Instead, I found myself leaning into his touch, just slightly, just enough to acknowledge the connection that had formed in blood and fear and impossible choices. Okay, I whispered, but just until this is over, just until it's safe. The smile that crossed his face was small but genuine, transforming his features from coldly dangerous to almost warm. Just until it's safe, he agreed. I promise. It was a promise we'd both come to realize was impossible to keep. The safe house in Oak Park turned out to be a renovated Victorian that looked like it belonged to a university professor, not a crime lord. Books lined the walls, comfortable furniture filled the rooms, and nothing about the space screamed danger or violence. It was so aggressively normal that I immediately distrusted it. This is yours? I asked, setting down the bag of clothes Isabella had hastily packed for me before we'd left through Benedetto's back entrance. Technically, it belongs to a shell corporation that exists only on paper, Damien replied, moving through the space with the ease of familiarity. He'd changed into dark jeans and a black Henley that should have made him look casual but somehow only emphasized the lethal grace in his movements. But yes, I own it. I bought it 3 years ago when I realized I needed somewhere that existed outside the organization, somewhere that was just mine. The vulnerability in that admission caught me off guard. I watched him move to the kitchen, pulling out coffee supplies with the automatic movements of someone who'd done this 1,000 times, and tried to reconcile the image of a man who needed a quiet sanctuary with the reality of what he was. How many people have you killed? The question emerged before I could stop it, blunt and graceless in the comfortable silence. Damien's hands stilled on the coffee grounds. He didn't turn around, didn't try to deflect or lie. Enough that I stopped counting after the first year. Does that scare you? Yes, I admitted honestly, but not as much as it should, which scares me more. He turned then, leaning back against the counter, with his arms crossed, studying me with that intense focus that made me feel simultaneously exposed and seen. You want to know if I'm a monster? If saving my life makes you complicit in the things I've done. Are you? I asked quietly. A monster? Sometimes. His honesty was brutal, unflinching. I've done things that keep me awake at night, made choices that haunt me. But I've also protected people who couldn't protect themselves, stopped violence before it started, built something better than what my father left me. He paused, jaw tightening. That doesn't balance the scales. Nothing ever will. But it's what I have. The coffee maker gurgled in the silence that followed, filling the air with the rich scent of dark roast. I should have been planning my escape, figuring out how to contact the authorities, something. Instead, I found myself asking another question. What did your father leave you? Damien's expression shuddered, walls slamming back into place with almost visible force. Nothing you need to worry about. You should rest. The guest room is upstairs, second door on the left. Everything you need should be there. The dismissal was clear. but I'd spent 5 years dealing with trauma patients who tried to push people away when the conversation got too close to their wounds. I recognized deflection when I saw it. "Damien, please." The word was soft but carried an edge of something raw. "Not yet." I nodded, recognizing boundaries even as I filed the information away for later. "Okay, but you need to rest too. Those wounds need time to heal, and you're running on adrenaline and stubbornness." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Is that your professional medical opinion?" "It's my professional observation that you're about 3 hours from crashing hard. When was the last time you actually slept?" 48 hours ago, give or take." He poured coffee into 2 mugs, sliding one across the counter toward me. "But I'll rest after. I've made some calls and secured the perimeter. Kozlov's men are good, but they're not magic. It'll take them at least a day to track us here, maybe more if I'm careful." "And then what?" "Then we move again." He said it like it was simple, like constantly running was just another aspect of his life. "I have 6 safe houses across the city, and more in the suburbs. We can stay ahead of them indefinitely if we need to." "That's not a life," I said softly. "That's just survival. Sometimes survival is enough." Damien's green eyes met mine over the rim of his coffee mug. "It's more than a lot of people in my world get." The resignation in his voice made something ache in my chest, a sympathy I had no business feeling for a man who'd just admitted to killing people. But looking at him now, with morning light streaming through the windows and exhaustion etched into every line of his face, I didn't see a monster. I saw someone who'd been born into violence and was doing his best to navigate it without losing himself completely. "Go," I said, making the decision without fully thinking it through. "Make your calls. Do whatever you need to do to keep us safe. But afterward, you're going to sleep for at least 6 hours, and I'm going to monitor your vitals to make sure those wounds aren't getting infected. Deal?" His surprise was obvious, quickly masked, but not before I caught it. "You don't have to take care of me, Sophia. I know you can handle yourself," I interrupted. "But I'm a nurse, and you're my patient, and right now that's the only thing that makes sense in this insane situation. So let me do what I'm good at, okay?" The tension in his shoulders eased slightly, and he nodded. "Okay, thank you." I spent the next 2 hours exploring the safe house, while Damien made calls in a language I didn't recognize from the study downstairs. The place was larger than it appeared from the outside, with 3 bedrooms upstairs and a finished basement that made my nursing instincts scream warnings I tried to ignore. Medical supplies lined one wall, enough equipment to perform minor surgeries. Weapons lined another, everything from handguns to rifles arranged with military precision. The guest room Damien had directed me to was surprisingly comfortable, decorated in soft blues and grays with a queen bed that looked far more inviting than the cot I usually crashed on during double shifts at the hospital. Someone had stocked the dresser with clothes in approximately my size, all new with tags still attached. The bathroom connected to the bedroom had toiletries, towels, everything I might need. It was too prepared, too convenient. Like Damien had been planning for this possibility long before last night. I was examining the contents of the medicine cabinet when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Damien appeared in the bedroom doorway, moving slower than he had earlier, the adrenaline clearly wearing off. "You stocked this room for someone." I said not quite a question. "Before last night, you were expecting to need a safe place for a woman." "For my sister," he corrected, leaning against the doorframe with careful casualness that didn't hide the pain he was in. "Natasha travels for business frequently, sometimes to places that aren't entirely safe. I wanted her to have somewhere secure if things went wrong." His expression softened slightly. "She's the only family I have left, the only person in the organization I trust completely." The vulnerability in that admission made me understand something important. Damien Volkov might be a crime lord, might be dangerous and capable of violence, but he was also a brother who prepared safe houses for his sister and kept coffee in a kitchen he rarely used. The contradiction was dizzying. "You need to lie down," I said, moving into professional mode. "Let me check your wounds and change the dressings." He didn't argue, which told me exactly how much pain he was in. We moved to the master bedroom, where he sat on the edge of the bed and carefully pulled off his shirt. In the morning light, I could see the full extent of last night's damage. The shoulder wound was clean but inflamed, the stitches holding but surrounded by bruising that would get worse before it got better. The wound in his side looked better, though I'd need to monitor it closely for signs of infection. "You're going to have some impressive scars," I said, gently probing the tissue around the shoulder entry point. "Does this hurt?" "Everything hurts," he admitted, "but it's manageable." That's not the same as being fine. I reached for the medical supplies he'd directed me to earlier, cleaning and redressing both wounds with practiced efficiency. "You need antibiotics, real ones, not whatever expired stock you have in that basement, and pain medication that's actually appropriate for gunshot wounds. I have connections who can get what I need. I'll make the call after I sleep." His eyes were already starting to close, exhaustion winning the battle against his stubborn determination to stay alert. "Lie down," I ordered softly. "I'll wake you in 6 hours to check your vitals again." He complied without argument, which concerned me more than anything else. As I pulled a blanket over him and stepped back, his hand shot out with surprising speed, catching my wrist. "Stay," he murmured, eyes already closed. "Just for a while. Please." I should have refused. Should have maintained professional boundaries and gone to the guest room to process everything that had happened. Instead, I found myself sitting on the edge of the bed, my wrist still captured in his loose grip, watching as his breathing evened out into sleep. He looked younger like this, the harsh lines of his face softening into something almost peaceful. Without the intensity of those green eyes watching everything, cataloging threats and calculating odds, he could have been anyone. A tired professional, coming down from a long shift. A friend who'd had too much to drink and needed watching. Someone normal. But the scars told a different story. I counted 7 visible ones across his torso, not including last night's additions. Some were old, white lines that had healed years ago. Others were newer, pink and raised. Each one represented a moment someone had tried to kill him and failed. "How did you survive this long?" I thought, studying the evidence of violence written across his skin. "How do you keep going when death is always one step behind?" As if sensing my thoughts, Damien shifted in his sleep, his grip on my wrist loosening but not releasing. I could have pulled away easily, but something kept me there, watching over him the way I'd watched over countless patients through the years. The way I'd sat with my mother during her final days, holding her hand as the cancer slowly stole her away. My phone vibrated in my pocket, startling me. I'd turned it back on against my better judgment, needing to check if anyone from the hospital had reported me missing. The screen showed a text from a number I didn't recognize. "We know you're with him. We know what you did. You have 24 hours to turn him over, or everyone you've ever cared about pays the price. This is your only warning." Ice flooded my veins. I stared at the message, reading it 3 times to make sure I understood correctly. They weren't just threatening me, they were threatening everyone I knew. My coworkers at the hospital. My neighbor Rose, who watered my plants when I worked doubles. Jake and his pregnant wife. With shaking hands, I navigated to my contacts and pulled up Jake's number. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail, his cheerful greeting a stark contrast to the fear churning in my stomach. "Jake, it's Sophia. I need you to listen very carefully. Those people from last night, they might come looking for you. Take Jenna and go somewhere safe. Don't tell me where, don't leave a trail. Just go. And Jake, I'm sorry. For all of it." I hung up before my voice could break and immediately called the hospital. The night supervisor answered, and I could hear the controlled chaos of the ER in the background. "Sophia, where the hell have you been? You missed your shift, you're not answering calls. Listen to me, Margaret. I need you to increase security at the hospital. Tell them there might be men asking questions about me, and those men are dangerous. If anyone matching my description shows up, call the police immediately. Sophia, what's going on? Are you in trouble? Just do it, please. And Margaret, thank you for everything. You've been a good friend." I ended the call before she could press for more information and sat staring at the phone in my hand. 24 hours. That's all the time Kozlov was giving me to betray Damien or watch everyone I cared about suffer. What did they say? Damien's voice made me jump. He was awake, watching me with alert eyes that held none of the confusion of someone just waking. He'd been listening, I realized. Probably woke the moment my phone vibrated. I handed him the phone silently, letting him read the message himself. His expression went cold, dangerous in a way that should have terrified me, but instead made me feel strangely safe. This was the man who'd built an empire, who'd survived countless assassination attempts. This was the predator those 6 men had been hunting. "They're bluffing," he said finally, but something in his voice suggested he wasn't entirely certain. "Kozlov knows that threatening civilians draws attention he can't afford. The police, the FBI, other families who have treaties about keeping innocent bystanders out of our wars. But you're not sure, I said quietly. Are you? No. The admission cost him something. I'm not sure. Kozlov's been getting more erratic lately, taking risks that don't make strategic sense. It's possible he's desperate enough to break the old rules. Then, we turn you over. The words emerged before I fully thought them through. Knee-jerk protectiveness for people who'd never asked to be dragged into this nightmare. We arrange a meeting, give Kozlov what he wants, and everyone else stays safe. Except me. Damien sat up despite the pain it clearly cost him, green eyes boring into mine with frightening intensity. You'd sacrifice me to save people you barely know. I'd sacrifice a crime lord to save innocent people, I corrected, even as my stomach twisted at the thought. That's the right thing to do. The moral choice. The moral choice. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Sophia, if you hand me over to Kozlov, he won't just kill me. He'll torture me for information, use me to draw out my sister and everyone else in my organization, then execute them all as a message about what happens when you challenge the Kozlov family. He stood, moving closer with that predatory grace despite his injuries. Your moral choice doesn't save anyone. It just starts a war that will kill hundreds of people who have nothing to do with any of this. Then what's the answer? I demanded, frustration and fear making my voice sharp. We can't just hide here while Kozlov hunts down everyone I know. And we can't fight him because that starts the same war you just described. So what do? We end it. The certainty in his voice made me look up. We don't hide, we don't run, and we definitely don't surrender. We go after Kozlov directly and end this before he has the chance to make good on his threats. That's insane. You're injured, we're outnumbered, and I'm a nurse with no combat training whatsoever. How exactly do you plan to, I have resources you don't know about? People who've been waiting for the right moment to move against Kozlov. My sister has connections in Europe that can help. He was already moving, pulling out his phone and sending rapid-fire texts. But I need time to coordinate, to set things in motion properly, which means we need to buy ourselves at least 48 hours. The message said 24. Then we make them believe they've won. Damien turned back to me, and the calculating look in his eyes made me understand why people feared him. You're going to call Kozlov back and tell him you're willing to negotiate. That you want guarantees for the people in your life before you agree to anything. It'll buy us time and make him think he's in control. And if he doesn't believe me? If he decides to hurt people anyway, just to prove he can? Damien crossed the space between us, his hands coming up to frame my face with surprising gentleness. Then I will burn down everything he's built and salt the earth where he stood. I promise you, Sophia. No one you care about will be hurt because you helped me. I won't allow it. The conviction in his voice should have been reassuring. Instead, it terrified me because I recognized it for what it was. Not a promise, but a threat, and I was no longer certain which one I preferred. I need air, I said, pulling away from his touch before I could do something stupid like lean into it. I need to think. The backyard is secure. Motion sensors, cameras, and a clear line of sight in all directions. You'll be safe there. He hesitated, then added more quietly. I know this isn't what you signed up for. I know you want to go back to your normal life and forget any of this happened. But I'm asking you to trust me a little longer, just until we can end this properly. I wanted to argue that I'd never signed up for any of this. That trust wasn't something earned in 24 hours of chaos and violence. But looking at him now, with exhaustion and pain etched into his features and genuine concern in his eyes, I found myself nodding. 48 hours, I said. We buy ourselves 48 hours, you coordinate whatever plan you're developing, and then we end this. But Damien, if anyone I know gets hurt because of the choices we make, I'll never forgive you, or myself. Understood. He pulled out his phone, scrolling to a contact and handing it to me. This is Kozlov's number. When you're ready, call him. Tell him you want to negotiate. Be emotional, scared, desperate. Make him believe he's won. The phone felt like a weapon in my hand, heavy with implications I didn't want to examine. I moved to the backyard, breathing in the cool morning air and trying to center myself the way I did before difficult surgeries. This was just another crisis to manage, another problem to solve with logic and steady hands. Except nothing about this was logical, and my hands were shaking as I dialed. Kozlov answered on the second ring. Miss Torres, how kind of you to call. His accent was thicker than Damien's, each word precisely enunciated like he'd learned English later in life and took pride in his mastery. "I trust you've considered my offer." "It wasn't an offer," I said, letting my fear bleed into my voice. "It wasn't difficult. It was a threat. Semantics. Do we have an agreement? I want guarantees first. Proof that the people I care about won't be touched regardless of what happens between you and Volkov. I want it in writing, witnessed by someone neutral who has the authority to enforce it." Kozlov laughed, the sound cold and amused. "You think this is a business negotiation? That I'll sign contracts and shake hands like we're merging companies?" "I think you're a man who understands leverage," I replied, channeling every bit of courage I possessed. "You want Damien Volkov. I can deliver him. But only if I know the people in my life are safe. Otherwise, what's to stop you from killing them anyway once you have what you want?" A long silence stretched across the line. I could hear voices in the background, someone speaking Russian in urgent tones. Finally, Kozlov spoke again, his voice carrying a note of grudging respect. "You're smarter than I expected, Miss Torres. Most people in your position would have already given me what I wanted just to make the fear stop." He paused. "Very well. You have 48 hours to produce Damien Volkov. In exchange, I will guarantee the safety of everyone on the list you're about to send me. Break this agreement, and I will destroy them slowly enough that you hear every scream. Understood? Understood. How do I contact you when I'm ready? You don't. I'll contact you." The line went dead, leaving me staring at the phone and wondering what exactly I'd just agreed to. Damien was waiting inside, his expression unreadable. "He bought it?" "He gave us 48 hours. I handed him back the phone with shaking hands. "And he wants a list of everyone I want protected." "Damien, if this goes wrong, it won't." His certainty would have been comforting if I didn't know how many things could go catastrophically wrong in the next 2 days. "I need you to trust me, Sophia. Can you do that?" Could I? Trust a man I'd known for barely a day, who'd admitted to killing people, who lived in a world so far removed from mine that we might as well be different species? Everything logical screamed no. Every instinct I'd developed through years of careful self-preservation said to run while I still could. "I don't know," I admitted honestly. "But I don't have a lot of other options, do I?" "There are always options." Damien moved closer, and this time I didn't step back. "You could call the police right now. Turn me in and hope they can protect you from Kozlov better than I can. Or you could run, change your name, disappear into a new life somewhere far from Chicago. I wouldn't stop you. Why not? I know where your safe house is. I could tell Kozlov everything. Because you won't." His hand came up, fingers brushing my jaw with feather-light touch. "You saved my life when you could have walked away. You performed surgery in a restaurant to keep me alive. You called in your friends to warn them even though it put you at risk. Every choice you've made tells me exactly who you are, Sophia Torres. And that person doesn't trade lives for safety." The way he saw me, the unwavering certainty in his gaze, made something crack in my carefully maintained composure. I was tired of being strong, tired of making impossible decisions, tired of pretending I had any control over a situation that had spiraled so far beyond my comprehension. "I'm scared," I whispered, the admission costing me everything. "I'm so scared, Damien. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be the person you think I am." "Yes, you do." His thumb traced my cheekbone, catching a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. "You've been doing it since the moment we met. You just didn't know that's what bravery looked like." The kiss, when it came, was soft and unexpected. His lips brushed mine with a gentleness that seemed impossible from someone capable of such violence, and I found myself responding before my rational mind could object. It lasted only seconds before he pulled back, green eyes searching mine for something I wasn't sure I could give. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "That was inappropriate given everything. Don't." I surprised us both by pulling him back, kissing him again with more certainty this time. "Don't apologize for the one thing that's made sense in the last 24 hours. His arms came around me carefully, mindful of his injuries but strong enough to make me feel safe despite knowing safety was an illusion in his world. We stood there in the morning light, two people from incompatible lives who'd been thrown together by chance and violence and impossible choices. 48 hours, he murmured against my hair. "I'll end this in 48 hours, and then you can decide if you want to go back to your old life or stay in mine. But right now, I need you to help me plan how we're going to destroy Viktor Kozlov without starting a war that kills everyone in Chicago." I pulled back enough to meet his eyes, seeing the exhaustion and determination warring in their green depths. Tell me what you need me to do. What followed was a crash course in the Chicago underworld I'd never wanted to receive. Damien spread maps and files across the dining room table, detailing Kozlov's operations with the precision of someone who'd been studying his enemy for years. Restaurants that laundered money, warehouses that stored illegal weapons, clubs that served as meeting places for the upper echelon of his organization. The key is his supply chain, Damien explained, pointing to a network of connections between various businesses. Kozlov's power comes from his ability to move product in and out of the city without detection. Take that away, and he becomes vulnerable. How do you take away someone's entire supply chain in 48 hours? You don't. You make it look like someone else did. Damien pulled out his phone, showing me photos of men I didn't recognize. These are members of the Castellano family. Isabella's cousins, mostly, along with some soldiers who've been looking for an excuse to move against Kozlov for months. If we can make it seem like they're responsible for disrupting his operations, Kozlov will retaliate against them instead of us, starting the war you said we were trying to avoid. A targeted war between two families who've been enemies for years. He corrected. Not a citywide bloodbath that kills civilians. It's not ideal, but it's the best option we have. I studied the maps, the files, the photos of men who would probably die because of the plan we were developing. These Castellano soldiers, do they know they're being used as scapegoats? Some do. Others will figure it out when Kozlov comes for them. Damien's expression was carefully neutral. They accepted the risk when they chose this life, Sophia. I'm not asking you to like it, but I am asking you to understand the reality of the world we're operating in. And Isabella? Does she know you're about to start a war between her family and Kozlov? She suggested it. The admission surprised me. Isabella wants Kozlov gone as badly as I do. He's been encroaching on Castellano territory for months, killing their people, taking their businesses. This gives them justification to respond with force, while keeping my hands clean enough to avoid direct retaliation. The complexity of it all made my head spin. Alliances built on mutual hatred, violence justified by ancient grudges, a world where starting a war was considered the responsible choice to avoid something worse. Everything I'd believed about right and wrong felt hopelessly naive in the face of such pragmatic brutality. I don't know if I can be part of this, I said quietly. I became a nurse to save lives, not to help plan operations that will end them. I know. Damien's hand found mine across the table, his touch grounding. And I wouldn't ask if there was another way. But the truth is, people are going to die regardless of what we do. Kozlov has already set things in motion that can't be stopped. The only question is whether we have any say in who survives and who doesn't. He was right. I hated that he was right, but I couldn't deny the logic. Kozlov's message had made his intentions clear. Either Damien died, or people I cared about would. There was no third option where everyone walked away unharmed. What do you need me to do? I asked, the words feeling like surrender. There's a clinic in Little Italy that Kozlov uses for his injured men. No one knows about it except his inner circle and the doctor he keeps on retainer. Damien pulled up a photo on his phone, showing a nondescript building with barred windows. I need you to get inside and plant evidence that links the Castellanos to the clinic. Medical records, financial transactions, anything that suggests they've been gathering intelligence on Kozlov's operations. You want me to break into a mob clinic and frame another crime family for espionage? I laughed, the sound edging toward hysterical. Do you hear how insane that sounds? Completely insane, he agreed. Which is why it might actually work. No one would expect a civilian to attempt something so dangerous. You'll have backup, of course. My people watching the perimeter, an escape route planned to the second. But you're the only one who can get inside without raising suspicion. Why me specifically? Because you're a nurse, and the doctor who runs that clinic is always looking for competent medical staff who won't ask questions. Damien showed me another photo, this one of an older man with salt and pepper hair and tired eyes. His name is Dr. Marcus Webb. He used to work at Mercy Hospital before an addiction to painkillers cost him his license. Kozlov owns his debt and keeps him supplied in exchange for absolute loyalty and discretion. Something clicked. In my memory, I know him. Or I knew him before he disappeared 3 years ago. He was one of the attending physicians when I was doing my clinical rotations. I studied the photo more carefully, seeing the man I'd once respected beneath the lines of addiction and compromise. He was a good doctor, kind to students, patient with difficult cases. Everyone was shocked when he vanished. Kozlov has a talent for finding people at their lowest and binding them to his service. Damien's voice carried an edge of disgust. Dr. Webb isn't a bad man, just a desperate one. If you can appeal to who he used to be, he might let you in long enough to do what we need. And if he recognizes me, if he remembers that I trained at Mercy, then you use it. Tell him you're in trouble, that you need work off the books, that you heard he might be able to help. It's not even entirely a lie. Damien's expression softened slightly. I know I'm asking too much. I know this goes against everything you believe in. But Sophia, I need you to trust that I wouldn't put you in this position if there was any other way. I wanted to refuse. Wanted to tell him to find someone else, to figure out a different plan that didn't require me to compromise every principle I'd built my life around. But looking at him now, seeing the genuine conflict in his eyes, I understood something important. Damien Volkov wasn't asking me to do this because it was easy or convenient. He was asking because in his world of limited options and impossible choices, I was the only person he trusted to do it right. That trust, unearned and terrifying, meant something I didn't have the emotional capacity to examine. When? I asked, the question sealing my fate. Tonight. Kozlov's clinic does most of its business after dark, when the streets are quiet and neighbors aren't watching. You'll go in at midnight, plant the evidence, and be out within 20 minutes. My people will handle the rest. 20 minutes, that's all. The time I had to break into a mob clinic, deceive a former colleague, and frame an entire crime family for something they didn't do. 20 minutes to cross a line I could never uncross. I need to prepare, I said, standing on legs that felt uncertain. If I'm going to pull this off, I need to be in the right headspace. Need to become someone who would actually take a job at an illegal clinic because she's desperate and out of options. You don't have to become anyone, Damien said quietly. Just be scared and tired and doing whatever it takes to survive. That's all Dr. Webb will see. He was right. I was scared and tired, and I was absolutely doing whatever it took to survive. The only difference was that I was doing it in a Victorian safe house with a crime lord instead of my cramped apartment with mounting bills and impossible shifts. The desperation was the same, just dressed in different circumstances. The rest of the day passed in preparation. Damien's sister Natasha called, from Prague, her voice sharp with concern when he explained the situation. They spoke in Russian for 10 minutes, arguing about something I couldn't follow, before switching back to English for my benefit. You're certain about this girl? Natasha asked, her skepticism clear even over the phone. You're trusting our entire operation to someone you met yesterday? I'm trusting her because she saved my life when she had every reason to walk away. Damien replied, his eyes finding mine across the room. That means something, Tasha. It means everything. Whatever Natasha saw in his voice made her pause. Fine. I'll have my contacts ready to move when you give the signal. But Damien, if this goes wrong, if Kozlov gets his hands on you because you trusted the wrong person, I'm burning down Chicago to get you back. I'd expect nothing less. He smiled slightly. Stay safe, little sister. This will be over soon. After the call ended, we went over the plan 3 more times until I won and could recite it backward. The route to the clinic, the location of the evidence I needed to plant, the exits I'd use if things went wrong. Damien had thought of everything, planned for every contingency, except the one variable he couldn't control. Me. What if I freeze? I asked as evening approached, and the reality of what I was about to do settled over me like a shroud. What if I get in there and panic and blow the whole thing? Then you run, and my people will extract you. Damien was checking weapons with practiced efficiency, preparing for his own role in tonight's operation. But you won't freeze, Sophia. You perform surgery in restaurants and stare down assassins without flinching. This is just another crisis to manage. This is nothing like that, I argued. When I helped you, I was acting on instinct. This is premeditated, planned. That makes it different. Only if you let it. He set down the gun he'd been inspecting and crossed to where I stood by the window. A moment you step into that clinic, you stop being Sofia Torres, the nurse. You become someone desperate enough to work for Kozlov, someone with nothing left to lose. Can you do that? Could I? Put on a mask and pretend to be someone I wasn't for the sake of a greater goal that felt increasingly unclear? I'd spent 5 years being the competent professional, the one everyone could rely on to keep her head in a crisis. Stepping into moral ambiguity felt like betraying everything that identity represented. But looking at Damien now, seeing the barely healed wounds that marked his skin and the genuine fear hidden beneath his confident exterior, I realized I'd already crossed that line. The moment I'd helped him into my car instead of walking away, I'd chosen his life over my principles. Everything that followed was just acknowledging that choice. "I can do it," I said, surprised to find I meant it. "I don't want to, but I can. That's all I'm asking." His hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "When this is over, when Kozlov is dealt with and you're safe, I'm going to tell you everything. About my family, about the choices that brought me here, about why someone like me has no business dragging someone like you into this darkness. Damien. But until then, I need you to believe that everything I'm doing is to protect you. Not because I owe you or because you're useful, but because somewhere in the last 24 hours, you became the person I most want to keep safe in this world." The confession hung between us, weighted with implications neither of us was ready to fully explore. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed with an alert. "It's time," he said, stepping back and becoming the crime lord I'd first met. All traces of vulnerability vanished beneath cold efficiency. "The car is waiting. Are you ready?" I wasn't. Would never be ready for what I was about to do, but I nodded anyway and followed him out into the Chicago night. The clinic sat on a quiet street in Little Italy, sandwiched between a closed tailor shop and what appeared to be an abandoned apartment building. Nothing about it screamed illegal medical facility, which was presumably the point. A single light burned in a second-floor window, and the front door was reinforced steel disguised to look like ordinary wood. I sat in the passenger seat of Damien's car 3 blocks away, watching the building through a tablet connected to surveillance cameras his people had installed earlier in the day. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. "You don't have to do this," Damien said quietly, not for the first time. "I can find another way. In the next 6 hours before Kozlov expects contact?" I shook my head. "No, you can't. We both know this is the only play that might work." He reached over, stilling my trembling hands with his own. "The moment you feel unsafe, the second anything goes wrong, you run. Don't try to complete the mission. Don't worry about the plan. Just get out and my people will handle the rest." I nodded, not trusting my voice. The documents I needed to plant were tucked into my jacket pocket, photocopies of Castellano financial records that Damien swore would be convincing enough to fool Kozlov's analysts. All I had to do was get into Dr. Webb's office, hide them where they'd be found during a routine security sweep, and leave. 20 minutes, in and out. "There's something you should know," Damien said as I reached for the door handle. "About what happens after tonight." I paused, looking back at him. In the dim light of the car, his green eyes were shadowed, unreadable. "Kozlov won't stop looking for you once he realizes you helped me. Even if the plan works perfectly, even if he turns his attention to the Castellanos, he'll eventually figure out your role in all this." His jaw tightened. "Which means you can't go back to your old life. Not ever." The words landed like a physical blow, even though part of me had already known this truth. My life as Sofia Torres, ER nurse, was over. "What are my options?" I asked, proud that my voice stayed steady. "You stay with me, under my protection, in my world, until we can arrange something permanent." He paused, clearly choosing his next words carefully. "Or I can get you out of the country. New identity, new life, somewhere Kozlov's reach doesn't extend. It would be safe, but it would be permanent. You'd never be able to come back." I wanted to ask what my life would look like in his world, whether I'd still recognize myself in a year or 5 or 10. But there wasn't time for those questions. "I should go," I said instead, "before I lose my nerve." "Sophia," he caught my hand as I opened the door. "Whatever happens after tonight, whatever you decide, I want you to know that meeting you was the first good thing that's happened to me in years. You reminded me that there are still people in this world worth protecting, worth changing for." The vulnerability in his voice nearly broke my resolve. I squeezed his hand once and stepped out into the night. The walk to the clinic felt both endless and far too short. I knocked on the reinforced door, and after a moment, a slot opened at eye level. "Clinic's closed," a gravelly voice informed me. "I'm looking for Dr. Webb," I said, letting exhaustion bleed into my voice. "I heard he might need staff. I'm a nurse, fully certified, and I need work that doesn't ask too many questions." The slot closed. I stood there counting heartbeats until the door opened, revealing a broad-shouldered man with a scar running down his neck and a gun barely concealed under his jacket. "Hands where I can see them," he ordered, patting me down with professional efficiency. He found my phone, my wallet, my keys. The documents were pressed flat against my stomach under my shirt, and his search didn't quite reach that far. "She's clean. You want me to send her up?" "Let her through," came a response from inside, a voice I recognized even after 3 years, Dr. Marcus Webb. I climbed narrow stairs to the second floor where Dr. Webb stood in his office, older and grayer than I remembered. Up close I could see the signs, dilated pupils, the slight sheen of sweat despite the cool temperature. He was high. "Do I know you?" he asked, squinting at me with confusion. "Sofia Torres," I said softly. "I did my clinical rotation at Mercy 3 years ago. You supervised some of my training." Recognition flickered across his features, followed immediately by shame. "You shouldn't be here. If you trained at Mercy, you can find work at better places than this." "I made some mistakes," I lied. "Got too close to a patient's family member. Things went bad. Now I need work off the books." He studied me for a long moment. "The people who run this place aren't forgiving of mistakes. If you work here, you see things and you keep your mouth shut. Can you do that?" "I can do whatever I need to do to survive." He nodded slowly. "There's an orientation packet in the file cabinet, 3rd drawer. Take it home, read it, and if you still want the job, come back tomorrow night." This was it. I moved to the file cabinet, pulling open the 3rd drawer and finding a folder marked New Staff. "Dr. Webb, do you have a pen I can borrow?" He turned to his desk, searching through drawers. It gave me 10 seconds. I dropped to one knee as if retying my shoe, pulled the documents from under my shirt, and shoved them into the narrow gap between the cabinet and the wall. They slid down with a soft whisper of paper on wood, landing exactly where Damien had said they needed to be. "Here," Dr. Webb said, holding out a pen. "Sophia, before you commit to this, you should know what you're really getting into. These people don't just run an illegal clinic. They're involved in things that will keep you awake at night." The genuine pain in his voice made me pause. "Why did you take the job?" "Because I was desperate and stupid and convinced myself it was temporary." He finally looked up. "Because Viktor Kozlov offered me a way out of the hole I'd dug for myself, and I was too weak to say no. 3 years later, I'm still here, still telling myself it's temporary. It's not too late, you could leave. People don't leave Kozlov. They die working for him, or they die trying to escape." He handed me the orientation packet with a sad smile. "If you're smart, you'll throw this away and forget you were ever here." I took the packet, knowing tomorrow night would never come. I left his office and descended the stairs, my heart pounding with the knowledge that I'd just successfully completed the most illegal act of my life. I'd made it maybe 50 feet when I heard the cars. 2 black SUVs appeared at the end of the street, moving fast. I didn't run. Running would mark me as suspicious. Instead, I kept walking, head down. The SUVs screeched to a halt outside the clinic. Men poured out, and Viktor Kozlov himself emerged from the lead vehicle. He was shorter than I'd imagined, stocky and powerful with cold, calculating eyes that swept the street. Those eyes moved past me, dismissing me as irrelevant. "Lock it down," Kozlov ordered. "No one in or out until we've searched every inch." I turned the corner, finally breaking line of sight, and my legs nearly gave out. My phone buzzed. "Keep walking. 2 more blocks, then someone will pick you up. You did perfectly." The extraction car appeared exactly where promised. Isabella Castellano looked out at me with an unreadable expression. "Get in quickly. Kozlov's people are already expanding their search perimeter." I climbed into the back seat, and the car pulled away. Isabella studied me with dark eyes. "You planted it?" "Behind the file cabinet in Webb's office." "Exactly where," Damien said. "And Kozlov arrived early?" "Just as I was leaving. He was ordering a full search." My hands were shaking again. What if the timing makes it obvious they were just planted? Then we adapt. But more likely, Kozlov will see what he expects to see. Isabella's phone buzzed, and she checked it with a frown. "Interesting. Kozlov's pulling men from his other operations, bringing everyone back to defend his core territory. Is that good or bad?" "It means he's scared, which is exactly what we want." She looked up. "He found the documents. Kozlov is convinced the Castellanos are preparing to move against him." "So the plan worked?" "Phase 1 worked. Now comes the hard part." Isabella turned forward. Now Damien has to make Kozlov believe the Castellanos are actually attacking, while my family defends against his retaliation, and we all survive the next 48 hours without Chicago burning down. We arrived at the safe house to find it transformed into a command center. Laptops covered the dining room table, displaying surveillance feeds and encrypted communications. Damien stood at the center, orchestrating everything with calm efficiency. He looked up when we entered, relief flashing across his features. He crossed to me in 3 strides, his hands cupping my face with urgent gentleness. "You're okay?" "I'm fine. It went exactly like you said." I leaned into his touch, despite the audience watching. "What happens now?" "Now we wait for him to make the first move." His thumbs brushed my cheekbones. "And we prepare for war." The next 6 hours were brutal. Reports came in from across the city, Kozlov's men mobilizing, taking positions around key Castellano holdings. Isabella's family responding with their own deployments. "This is insane," I said, watching it unfold on screens. "People are going to die because of documents I planted." "You're preventing more deaths than you're causing," Damien replied. "Kozlov was always going to move against the Castellanos eventually. We're just controlling when and how it happens. And the people who die, in the meantime, they signed up for this life knowing the risks." His honesty was brutal. "It doesn't make their deaths meaningless, but it makes them different from civilian casualties." I wanted to argue, but looking at the screens showing armed men taking positions across Chicago, I understood he was right. This was always going to happen. "I need air," I said. "The backyard is still secure," Damien gestured. "Don't go beyond the fence line." I stood in the garden, looking up at stars barely visible through light pollution, trying to reconcile who I'd been with whoever I was becoming. "You're handling this better than I expected," Isabella said, appearing beside me. "Most civilians would have broken by now. Maybe I just haven't processed it yet. Or maybe you're stronger than you think." Isabella studied me. "He cares about you. My brother never cared about anyone except Natasha. Never let anyone close. Then you saved his life and suddenly he's rearranging everything to keep you safe." Before I could respond, Damien appeared in the doorway. "We have a problem. Kozlov's not just defending, he's preparing to launch a preemptive strike against the Castellanos. Tonight." Isabella cursed in Italian. "How long do we have?" 2 hours, maybe 3. He's mobilizing everything for one massive push." Damien's expression was grim. "We need to accelerate the timeline." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means we stop playing defense." Damien pulled up a map, highlighting a building in the industrial district. "This is Kozlov's command center. If we can hit it while he's focused on the Castellanos, we can cripple his organization permanently." "You want to attack his command center while he's launching a war," I said slowly. "That's the plan?" "That's the plan." Damien turned to face me. "And I need you to stay here where it's safe." "No." The word surprised us both. "If you're going into danger because of a plan I helped execute, then I'm coming. With you." "Sophia, this isn't a negotiation." "You're right. It's not." I moved closer. "I've been making impossible choices for 2 days because you asked me to trust you. Now I'm asking you to trust me. I'm a trauma nurse. If people get hurt, you need someone who can keep them alive. That's me." "She's right," Isabella cut in. "Having a medic who can handle field injuries changes everything." Damien looked like he wanted to argue, but finally nodded with clear reluctance. "You stay behind me at all times. You follow orders without question. And if I tell you to run, you run. Agreed?" "Agreed." The next hour was preparation. Isabella's people provided me with a vest that felt heavy but offered protection. Damien gave me a crash course in basic tactical movements. "Remember," he said, checking my vest, "you're not here to fight. You're here to save lives if things go wrong. Stay back, stay safe, and trust my people to handle the violence. If you're hooked on this story, makes plans, ensure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one." Kozlov's command center was a warehouse in the industrial district, surrounded by a fence and security lights. From our position 2 blocks away, it looked impenetrable. 3 guards on the perimeter, one of Damien's men reported. Another 4 inside. Kozlov himself isn't there. "Sophia stays with Isabella," Damien ordered. "Command vehicle coordinating extraction. If anyone gets hurt, you stabilize them. I thought I was coming with you. You are. To the perimeter where you can actually help without becoming a liability in a firefight. His voice was firm. This is the compromise. Take it or stay here. I took it. Isabella and I watched from a block away as Damien's team moved into position. Shadows separating from shadows. He's good at this, Isabella said. Better than his father ever was. Victor knows it, which is why he's so desperate to eliminate Damien. The operation began quietly. Damien's team breaching the service door, moving through the warehouse with precision. For 3 minutes, nothing happened. Then the radio crackled. Contact! Multiple hostiles engaging on the main floor. Gunfire erupted. Muzzle flashes lit up warehouse windows. Team 2. Proceed to the records room. Team 1, hold your position. Damien's voice over the radio was calm, controlled. More gunfire. Then an explosion that rattled windows 2 blocks away. Man down. We need medical. Isabella was already moving, starting the engine. That's our cue. We drove toward the warehouse at reckless speed. By the time we stopped at the perimeter, Damien's team was extracting. 2 men carried a third between them, blood soaking through his tactical gear. I was out before the vehicle fully stopped. Get him over here, lay him flat! The injured man was young, maybe 25. The bullet had caught him in the wan thigh, missing the femoral artery by centimeters. You're going to be okay, I told him, already applying pressure. Stay still and let me work. His name was Marcus. He had a fiancée who didn't know what he really did. Parents who thought he worked in private security. A younger brother in college. I can't die, he kept saying. I promised Jenny I'd make it home. You're not going to die, but you need to stop talking and save your energy. More of Damien's team emerged from the warehouse, carrying boxes and hard drives. Damien appeared last, blood on his jacket but moving with his usual grace. His eyes found me immediately, relief flashing across his features when he saw I was safe. How bad? He'll live if we get him to a hospital in the next hour, I replied, but he needs surgery. Isabella, take him to the clinic in Oak Park. Damien was already directing his team to load stolen materials into vehicles. I climbed in beside Marcus, monitoring his vitals during the meaty drive. Behind us, sirens wailed, flashing lights heading toward the warehouse we'd just left. Police responding too late. Doctor. Ross was a woman in her 60s with steady hands and no curiosity about why we were bringing her a gunshot victim at 3 a.m. He'll be fine, she assured me. You did good work. Probably saved his life. The praise should have felt good. Instead, it just made me aware of the blood covering my hands. Marcus's blood, shed because he'd followed Damien's orders into danger. I walked outside and threw up in the parking lot. Isabella found me there, offering water without comment. We stood in silence while I rinsed my mouth. First time seeing someone get shot? First time being responsible for it happening. I took a long drink. That man got hurt because we raided that warehouse. Because I planted evidence. His blood is on my hands, Isabella. Literally and figuratively. Yes, it is. Her honesty was brutal but necessary. Welcome to our world, Sophia. This is what it looks like when you make hard choices. Blood and consequences and the knowledge that people get hurt when you take action. How do you live with it? By remembering why we do it. Marcus knew the risks when he signed up. He chose this life. That doesn't make his injury meaningless, but it makes it different from an innocent person getting hurt through no fault of their own. Damien arrived an hour later with news that felt both triumphant and terrible. We got everything, he said, exhaustion clear in his face. Financial records, supplier lists, evidence of corruption. It's enough to destroy him completely. And how many people died for it? 3 of Kozlov's men. None of ours except Marcus's injury. His expression was neutral. In terms of military operations, that's considered clean. Clean, I laughed, the sound edging toward hysterical. There's nothing clean about any of this. He moved closer, hands cupping my face with impossible gentleness. I know this isn't what you signed up for, but what we did tonight will save lives in the long run. Kozlov's records prove he was planning something that would have killed dozens of civilians. How convenient that stopping him required violence too. Yes, it is convenient, and it doesn't change the fact that I'd make the same choice again. His honesty cut through my anger. This is who I am, Sophia. Someone who chooses calculated violence to prevent worse violence. If you can't accept that, I'll understand. but I won't apologize for protecting this city in the only way I know how. I should have walked away. Instead, I found myself leaning into his touch, accepting comfort from the person responsible for putting me in a position to need it. What happens now? Now we leak Kozlov's records to the authorities. By morning, he'll have bigger problems than finding me. The FBI will investigate, the other families will know he's compromised, and his organization will start questioning whether he's worth following. And then he's finished. Either he runs or he fights, and either way, he's no longer a threat to you or anyone you care about. His thumbs brushed away, tears I hadn't realized I was crying. Then you decide whether you want to stay in my world or leave it behind. The choice felt impossible. Stay with a man who'd shown me more genuine care in 2 days than anyone had in years, but who lived in violence. Or leave, start over, and wonder what might have happened if I'd been brave enough to accept who he was. I need time, I said finally, to process all of this. To figure out who I am after everything that's happened. You have it, however much time you need. His voice was soft. Just know that meeting you changed something fundamental. You made me believe I could be more than what my father's legacy demanded. That has to count for something. It did count. The question was whether it counted for enough. We returned to the safe house as dawn broke over Chicago. The media had received anonymous packages containing Kozlov's records, and stories were breaking across every outlet. Kozlov's scrambling, Isabella reported. He's pulling resources, calling in favors, but it's too late. The FBI announced an investigation, and 3 key lieutenants have turned themselves in for immunity. It's over, Damien said with certainty. By tomorrow, Kozlov won't have an organization left. He'll either go into hiding or end up in federal custody within a week. We'd won, and it felt terrible. You should rest, Damien said, finding me by the window watching the sunrise. You've been awake for almost 48 hours. I don't think I can sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see Marcus bleeding. I hear the gunfire. That feeling never goes away, he admitted. You just learn to live with it, to balance the harm you cause against the good you achieve. I was a nurse, I said, the past tense feeling. Significant. I spent 5 years learning to save lives. Now I've helped orchestrate an operation that put someone in surgery. How do I reconcile those two things? By remembering that you also saved lives. Mine, Marcus's, all the people Kozlov would have hurt if we'd let him continue. Damien moved closer. You're not a different person. You're the same woman who helped a stranger because it was right. The circumstances changed, not your fundamental nature. What if I don't know what my fundamental nature is anymore? Then you figure it out. You take the time you need and decide who you want to be going forward. His hand found mine. But whatever you decide, I want you to know that these past 2 days meant something. You meant something. That won't change. Ask me again in a week, I said. When I've slept and processed. Ask me then what I want. What kind of future might be possible. A week, he agreed. And Sophia, thank you. For saving my life, for trusting me, for being exactly who you are. You're extraordinary. I didn't feel extraordinary. I felt shattered and remade, broken down and rebuilt into something I didn't quite recognize. But maybe that was okay. Maybe becoming someone new wasn't always loss. Sometimes it was growth. Stay with me, I said impulsively. Not because it's safer or strategic, just because I don't want to be alone right now. He did. We went upstairs, and he held me while I finally let myself cry. For the life I'd lost, for the person I'd been, for everyone caught in the machinery of violence we'd set in motion. He didn't try to comfort me with platitudes. He just held me, solid and present. Eventually, exhaustion won. I fell asleep in his arms, safe, despite everything. When I woke, afternoon sun was streaming through windows, and news alerts were flooding my phone. Kozlov had been arrested trying to flee the country. The FBI had dismantled his organization. Isabella's family had secured territory without significant violence. The war everyone feared had ended before it began, resolved through leaked documents instead of bodies in streets. We'd won, completely. I found Damien in the kitchen making coffee. He looked up when I entered, and the smile that crossed his face was warm and genuine. Good morning, or good afternoon. You slept for 14 hours. I needed it. I accepted the coffee. I saw the news. It's really over? It's really over. Kozlov's facing charges that will keep him in federal prison for life. His organization is scattered, his assets frozen. Damien's expression was satisfied but not quite triumphant. You're safe, Sophia. Everyone you care about is safe. You can go back to your life if that's what you choose. Could I? My apartment would be waiting, my job theoretically still available. I could walk away from all of this and pretend the past few days had been a fever dream. What if I don't want to go back? The words surprised us both. What if the person I was before isn't who I want to be anymore? Damien set down his coffee carefully, green eyes studying me. What are you saying? I'm saying that for 5 years I've been playing it safe. Following rules, building a careful life that never asked me to be brave. I moved around the counter, closing the distance. Then I met you, and everything changed. I stopped being careful and started being necessary. Started mattering in a way I never did when I was just another nurse working double shifts. Sophia, let me finish. I touched his face. I saw who you really are beneath the reputation. Someone who protects people, who makes impossible choices so others don't have to, who's trying to build something better. That person is worth knowing, worth staying for. The vulnerability that flashed across his features made my heart contract. You don't have to decide this now. You're still processing trauma. Give it time. A week, I said, echoing his earlier words. You told me to take a week, but Damien, I'm pretty sure I already know what my answer will be. His kiss was soft and thorough, tasting of coffee and promises neither of us was ready to voice. When we finally broke apart, he pressed his forehead to mine. Whatever you decide, you'll always have a place in my life if you want it. His hands framed my face with devastating tenderness. You saved me, Sophia, in more ways than you know. Let me spend however long you'll allow showing you what that means. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story. 3 months later, I stood in the kitchen of our shared apartment and marveled at the normalcy we'd somehow built, Damien coordinating legitimate business operations. Me taking online classes to finish my advanced nursing degree, both of us navigating the complicated reality of a life between two worlds. It wasn't perfect. There were nights when his past caught up with him, when I saw the darkness he'd lived with. There were days when I questioned whether love was enough to bridge the gap between who we'd been and who we were becoming. But then he'd come home and kiss me like I was the only good thing in his dangerous world. Or I'd catch him reading medical journals so he could understand my work, and I'd remember that transformation wasn't about becoming someone different. It was about finding someone who made you want to be the best version of yourself. Marcus recovered and left the organization, using money Damien provided to start over with his fiancée. Doctor. Webb entered rehab, finally free from Kozlov's control. My friends returned to their lives, protected by systems they couldn't see. The city moved on. Isabella's family consolidated power with Damien's help, building something more stable and less violent. Chicago didn't become perfect, but it became better, safer. I'd made my choice. Chosen complexity over simplicity, love over safety. A man who'd shown me that redemption was possible even from the darkest places. It wasn't the life I'd imagined, but it was real and hard-won and completely, impossibly ours. Sometimes the most powerful redemption stories begin in the most unlikely moments. In the instant, a bleeding stranger stumbles into your life, and everything changes. In the choice to help when walking away would be easier. In the discovery that love can grow even in the spaces between violence and hope. I'd pretended a bleeding mafia boss was my drunk husband, and in doing so, I'd saved both our lives. Not just from assassins and rival families, but from the lonely isolation we'd both been living in before fate brought us together. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real, and messy, and ours. And that was enough. 6 months after that night in the alley, I stood in the garden of our Oak Park home watching Damien teach a group of young men about conflict resolution instead of escalation. The transformation had been gradual but undeniable. Violence should always be the last option, not the first, he was saying, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd lived both sides of that philosophy. The moment you reach for a gun, you've already lost the war that matters. These weren't criminals he was mentoring. They were kids from the neighborhoods he'd once exploited, given opportunities his organization now funded. Scholarships, job training, paths out of the cycle that had consumed so many lives. It was Isabella's idea initially, but Damien had embraced it with the same intensity he'd once directed toward violence. "You're staring again," Isabella said, appearing beside me with 2 glasses of wine. She'd become an unexpected friend, someone who understood the complexity of loving a man with blood on his hands while believing in his capacity for change. "I'm watching," I corrected, accepting the wine. "There's a difference." And what do you see?" I considered the question, watching Damien crouch down to speak at eye level with a boy who couldn't be more than 15. "I see someone becoming who he was always meant to be, before his father's legacy, before the violence became normal. I see the man who existed underneath all along." "You saved him," Isabella said simply. "The night you pretended he was your drunk husband and walked him past 6 assassins, you saved more than his life. You saved his soul." I wanted to argue that people saved themselves, that I'd just been the catalyst. But watching Damien now, seeing the gentleness in his interaction with these kids who reminded him of who he'd once been, I understood what Isabella meant. Marcus had sent a card last week from Oregon, where he and Jenny were expecting their first child. Dr. Webb was 18 months sober, working at a free clinic and rebuilding his medical license. The violence that had defined Chicago's underworld for decades had diminished to occasional disputes, quickly mediated by the council Damien and Isabella had established. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when Damien's phone rang with problems that required his particular expertise. Still nights when he came home carrying the weight of choices I'd never fully understand. But those moments were becoming rarer, replaced by mornings like this one where he mentored instead of threatened, built instead of destroyed. "April called yesterday," I said, referencing my nursing supervisor, who'd kept my position open despite my unexplained absence. "She wants to know when I'm coming back to Mercy." "Are you?" Isabella's voice was carefully neutral. "I start next week, part-time at first, working with trauma cases." I smiled at her surprised expression. Damien and I talked about it. I need to be more than just his partner. I need to be Sofia Torres, the nurse who saves lives. That's who I am at my core. And he's okay. With that, the exposure, the risk of someone recognizing you. Kozlov's dead. The news had broken 3 months ago. A heart attack in federal prison that was probably exactly what it seemed. His organization is scattered. The threats that made me a target are gone. I paused, choosing my words carefully. And Damien understands that he fell in love with someone who runs toward danger to help people, not away from it. He can't ask me to stop being that person. Isabella raised her glass. To complicated men and the women stubborn enough to love them anyway. I clinked my glass against hers, laughing. To second chances and new beginnings. Damien looked up then, his green eyes finding mine across the garden with the unerring accuracy that still made my heart skip. The smile that crossed his face was unguarded, genuine, nothing like the controlled mask he'd worn when we first met. He said something to the kids that made them laugh, then crossed the garden toward me with that fluid grace that would always carry hints of danger. "Hey," he said softly, pulling me close despite our audience. "You okay?" "I'm perfect," I replied, meaning it. Just thinking about how different life looks now than it did 6 months ago. Different good or different complicated. Both. I kissed him, not caring who saw. Definitely both. He laughed, the sound rich and warm. "I can live with complicated. Complicated brought you into my life and gave me a reason to become someone better." "You were always someone better," I corrected. "You just needed someone to believe it." "No," he said, serious now, his forehead pressed to mine. "I needed you to save me. And you did, Sophia. Every single day, you still do." The kids were watching us with various degrees of amusement and teenage awkwardness. Isabella was smiling into her wine glass. The Chicago sun was warm on my shoulders, and the man I loved was solid and real and mine. I'd pretended a bleeding Mafia boss was my drunk husband to save his life. In return, he'd given me a life worth living, full of purpose and passion and the kind of love that transformed everything it touched. Sometimes, redemption begins in the most unlikely places. In a dark alley with assassins closing in a split-second decision to help instead of walk away, in the discovery that love can grow even in the spaces between violence and hope. This was our story. Imperfect, complicated, impossibly real, and I wouldn't change a single moment of it. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.